Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to this session on Universal Request. We will be doing a walkthrough of the features, use cases, and I will also give you a quick demo or a quick walkthrough of some of the main or some of the most important configurations that we have for UR. Before I get started, a few housekeeping stuff. So safe harbor notice, we'll have some forward-looking statements. So yeah, that is for this. Now, this is you will see a link being shared shortly. You can use that link to really keep track of the webinar that will being shared out here. So please keep a lookout on the chat for the link there. Couple of housekeeping stuff. So you can have your question posted using the Q&A feature. Please try to keep the questions on the Q&A. If you have any questions on the Q&A box itself, so that will help us kind of differentiate and answer the questions. Please try and refrain from using the chats, because I think it'll get mixed in the conversation that we are having there. And then once the webinar is done, it will be recorded and it will be shared on the ServiceNow community. So you can refer to this later on once the webinar is over as well. And at the end of the webinar, we would want to know how we did. So there will be a short survey that will be sent out. Please make sure, take your time to kind of give that feedback to us. That will help us improve for the future sessions. Right. So with this, I will deep dive now into UR. So starting with the agenda. So we start off with the intro and the whys as to why did we kind of envision this product and what problem is it solving. I'll give you a quick overview of what the features are and what are the use case that it primarily solves, right? Quick touch upon the licensing aspect of it. What is it that you need for UR to be available with your subscriptions? Design consideration, these are mainly for customers where you are looking to evaluate UR is a good fit or not. So these design considerations will help you make those decisions. Roadmap, past and the current roadmap that we have for UR. And then there are a few questions that we have. I probably will not be able to go through the entire all the FAQs, but I will touch upon the few important ones, and you can refer the slide later on for questions that we have usually encountered when we have talked to customers for a universal request. And then finally, we have a demo, and the demo is going to be mostly around the configurations. So I will give you a quick walkthrough about the configurations and what it feels like to do it. Right. And also I will call out, there are some pre-recorded demos that we have available that kind of gives you the end-to-end, coverage of what universal request can do. These are also available on YouTube and the community sites that we have for the ServiceNow. So we can refer those as well. Moving on. So let's start with what and why did we envision universal request, right? So I think let me start with an example. I think it has happened for most of us, whereby we wanted to request for something. You go to portal or you go to your phone app and you realize that you are not able to find the right item, right? We probably end up creating a request in the wrong department or in the wrong catalog. And what happens is that the agent comes back and says, hey, sorry, this is not the right department for you, and I'm closing on it. I'm closing the request. You need to raise a separate request for a different department. Now, the agent doesn't really want to be rude, but the problem here is, even just like the employee, the agent also does not have a good way to really route that request to the right department. So what this leads to is for the employee to really, the employee does not really have a good way to now raise a request, because he doesn't know where to go, right? It kind of becomes a dead end for them, because there is no right way to kind of raise this request. So, the employees are really confused as to what should I do? Whom should I raise this request to, right? So to solve this problem with universal request, what we have done is that these are for customers who are really looking to make the transition to enterprise service management or global business services, right? There needs to be a cohesive way of resolving requests. When employees are asking questions, how do you kind of resolve the request without really asking the employees to go back and figure out what the right department is for this, right? So we want a happy ecosystem where everyone exists and they're able to talk to each other, really route the request to the right department without really having to go back and forth or close the request for them to really figure out how do I raise this request in the right department, right? So the idea here is to provide a seamless experience for the employees where they don't have to really go through the pain of figuring out what the request is or figuring out who the right department is. And even for the agents, we want to give them a way or empower them to really collaborate and really drive productivity and efficiency in the request that they're solving, right? So that's what universal requests is supposed to be doing, right? Now, summarizing the problem statement, we have three personas that we're talking about here. We have the employees who are probably the direct beneficiaries of this because they don't know where to go. They don't have a good way to raise the request. Experiences vary. Like if you have an IT ticket versus you have an HR ticket, the experience is going to be different, right? And if you close the HR ticket, for some reason, the IT ticket will have no context of what happened in the previous request because they'll have to start from the beginning, right? For the agents, definitely there is no way right now they can collaborate. Like IT and HR probably cannot collaborate because there's no easy way to do it. They can do it offline, but there is no way within the system you can open a ticket and do that, right? For the GBS owners, and these are owners who are probably looking at the process overall, right? So they definitely need a bird's eye view of what's going on. What's the SLA like, right? Are the departments kind of working closely together? Are they having the right kind of tools to really collaborate with each other? Because if you don't have anything like that, the GBS owner will also have no visibility as to how the process is going, right? So with this problem statement in mind, what does universal request solve, right? The first person, as we talked about, is employee. Now, with universal request, what we have done is we have given a single way for them to raise a request, right? They can use that universal help feature to raise a request, and they raise it only once, and they can raise the request in the natural language without really figuring out which department is the right department for it, right? In the process, we have also shipped a new page, which is called the standard ticket page, where every request is going to look the same now. It will not be different across different departments, irrespective of which department the ticket is being handled by, the interface is going to be the same, right? Also, given I said that the request need not be closed, it can easily be transferred because a universal request enables that. Employees will only have to ask for help once, right? Once they ask the help, it will be taken care of in the back end to make sure that it goes to the right department and it gets resolved without really the employee having to go through that pain. And finally, there is security built into universal requests, which can actually mask or make sure that your sensitive requests, especially from the HR side or finance or legal, are taken care of. You have a way to mask those tickets. You have a way to protect those tickets and enable only those people or only those agents who have the right to access those kind of tickets, right? Now, for the agent, with universal requests, it is looking to promote collaboration because now you have cross-departmental tasks that can be resolved by agents just simply transferring the ticket to the right department, and they can continue on the work that the previous department has done, right? That's one. The second thing is the context is always there because universal request once opens has the entire life cycle, irrespective of whether it has been transferred or not transferred. The context is always there with an universal request. So if you have, for example, HR did some work and they realized that legal needs to do some work, they can transfer the ticket to legal, and the entire context that HR has, given HR chooses to share those contexts, the context is always available, and they are now able to see that and take those contexts into consideration when they resolve the request without really having to ask the employee again. Routing, in terms of we have ML models built into universal requests, which can take care of routing. So if you have enough data to train the models, it will automatically take care of routing the request to the right department without a physical agent having to do that on a day-to-day basis. And finally, there is more accountability. As I said, accountability when you have a request that is jumping from one department to the other department, it is very important to make sure that you are tracking the SLAs. Because right now, if you really look at it, if a ticket gets opened in HR and HR after 2 days says, okay, I'm closing it, right? So HR probably has met their SLA, but they close the request and now it goes to IT, and IT took another 2 days to do it. So overall, if you really look at it, there was 4 days spent on it. But from the employee perspective, right? But from the agent perspective or from the department perspective, that context was not there. So that context can now be achieved or provided using universal request because you have that end-to-end SLA being tracked until the request is being closed for the employees. Okay, now this is a very, very common question, and this is the reason why it is one of the earlier slides. Like, how is UR different from interactions? I think this is a question that we have probably received in every customer call that we have done so far. So universal request and interaction records are very different items, right? Now, interaction records, as we all understand right now, is the moment in time record, whereby if an employee is calling the help desk, agent is trying to understand what the request is. They take down the request in an interaction record, and until they create and once they create the request, the interaction record does not exist, right? On the other hand, universal request is actually a task, right? So it is actually inheriting the task table, and it is actually a task which the employees can see and track, right? Which is not possible using interaction records, because interaction records are never exposed to the employees, right? That's the first thing. Second thing is you can definitely do reporting. As I said in the previous thing, there is SLA tracking, there is reporting. You can do all of those things with universal request, whereas we cannot do you cannot achieve the same with interaction record, right? And one of the biggest thing that universal request enables is transfers, right? So you can now transfer tickets from one department to another department without really losing the context or the entire flow of the request, right? Which is not possible using an interaction record. Interaction record, as I said, is a moment in time record. It's a temporary thing which is used to hold information until the point our actual request is getting created, right? So that's definitely one of the top questions, and I'm pretty sure some of you might already have had that question. So this is the reason we have this right up in the beginning. So now moving on, where does universal request and how can, what are the use cases that universal request kind of solves for? Right now, you must have been seeing these terms called unstructured and structured request. Now, the way we have defined unstructured and structured is, say, any employee who raises a general inquiry, which definitely does not have any workflow attached to it, right? It's a general request where you don't know what to do with it. Those are unstructured, right? Requests coming in the form of emails, or employees using the general inquiry forms to kind of create those requests. Those are requests which are unstructured. On the other hand, your record producers, catalog items, these are structured requests because you have a workflow, you have a fulfillment logic attached to it, which will take care of resolving the request and will guide it to the right place, right? And what we have understood from our previous conversations and based on the research that we had done beginning of this project is that a lot of requests comes in through unstructured channels or unstructured ways, right? Which needs to be tried just manually and then routed to the right department. And that is when you notice this ticket's being closed and the employee is being asked to refile the request in the right department, right? So let's go start with scenario one. We have an unstructured request that is coming in, and it can be in the form of a general inquiry or in the form of an email that the employee is saying, for example, the employee is saying, I am not getting what I'm looking for. Say, employer has some issues with payroll, and the employee is not able to figure out which the right catalog item is, right? Now, what we can do with universal requests is there is a general form now or a generic form now called request help, which is available out of the box. We have configured that to show up at the bottom of the search page. So if the employee does not really get the right item that they're looking for, they can use the request help button to kind of create a request. This form has just two fields, the short description and the description. So they can just type in whatever their request is and submit the problem, right? Once they have submitted the problem, and if you really notice in this process, there is no department selection or there is no catalog selection required. Employees simply filing a request without really having to worry about where should it be routed to. Once the request has been submitted, there will be a triaging or a layer, which is the tier 1 layer, where either if you're using machine learning, then machine learning can take care of routing it to the right department. But if you're not using machine learning, you can have your tier 1 agents take a look at it, understand who this request is intended for, and then submit the request and then route to the right department, right? So if, for example, employee says, I have issues with my payroll, which is in most cases a finance or a HR request. So the triaging agent can now route it to the HR department. HR case will get created and get associated with the UR, right? But the employee will always be seeing the UR. So for the employee, the view is always UR, irrespective of whether it's an IT ticket or HR ticket at the back end. The view for the employee is always the UR. They always see the universal request. And that's the reason, irrespective of where you transfer the request, nothing changes for the employee, right? And once it goes there, HR agent can look at it. And if for some reason they realize, okay, this is not my request, it is a finance request, they can transfer it to the finance department and they can take care of it. Again, in this process, nothing changes for the employee. The employee is still seeing the universal request and seeing the ticket progress, right? That's the first use case. The other use case is you already have existing catalog items and record producers, and you probably notice that some of the record producers are getting misused or they are not used the right way to create the right request. So you can actually configure universal request to create for those record producers to create a universal request the moment they're submitted. Right, so there is a configurations on the record producers screen where you can go and enable universal request for it. Once you do that, every record producer that gets submitted, or the record producer that you have selected, once it gets submitted, universal request gets attached to it. The employee gets to see the universal request. For you, it's still the same HR request, or for the agents, it is still the HR request that they have asked for. Right. So these are the two ways you can create universal requests using a structured, or you can configure them for structured requests as well as for unstructured requests. In the process, you don't need to create any new record producer or catalog items to submit it. All your existing catalog items and record producers will support creation of universal request just by enabling that configuration. Okay, I think that's a lot to digest. I'll just pause for a moment and let that sink in. I know there are questions probably coming in the Q&A session, so I have Srinivas who's looking to answer those, and I'll take a look at those once I'm done with the presentation as well. Okay, so that's in summary, this is what UR is, right? So right now, out of the box with UR, you get integrations with ITSM incidents. You get integration with RITM, and there is ITBM IDEA integration as well. So out of the box, this is all enabled, all configurations are present. So the moment you enable UR, you can enable UR for any of the items that I talked about on the technology workflows. For employee workflows, HR service delivery, of course, is there. The integration exists out of the box with configurations. WSD is also there, workplace service delivery, legal service delivery went out with it as well. Procurement and other suits also. So now, other than this, if you have custom apps, right, that you have built using App Engine or the platform, you can onboard them as well for universal requests. There is nothing that is stopping us from doing that. So if you have other apps or other departments that you want to integrate with UR, that can be done using the guided setup that we have provided for UR. Something that I'll quickly walk you through at the end of the session. We have a guided list of steps that you need to follow to kind of onboard any app that you have custom built as well for your organization. Okay, coming on to licensing, we have two modules or two SKUs for universal request. One is the Pro SKU and one is the standard SKU. Now, there is no separate licensing fee required for universal request. It comes standard with your existing license. So if you have your ITSM Pro or your HR Pro, or you have ITSM standard and HR standard, you can get universal requests along with it. So the entitlement is defined by your existing entitlements that you have for any of the SKUs that you have already purchased, right? So there is no separate fee that you have to pay for using universal requests. It comes with your existing packages that you have. Okay, now moving on, the design consideration. This is something that I talked about in the beginning, right? So what is it that you need to keep in mind as you look to implement universal request, right? So I think the first thing that you see is whenever the universal request gets submitted, it comes to a routing layer, right? Where tier 1 agents have to sit and figure out where the department ticket has to go into. So you'll probably need to identify what that structure is going to look like. Who are the people who should be part of it? Should you have participations from the different departments, tier 1 agents from different departments, or is it one group that is doing routing for all the different departments, right? So that's one. SLAs, right? As I said, if you are not into the GBS or the ESM kind of model, you probably will not have the persona which is actually doing the end-to-end reporting or end-to-end SLA reporting or end-to-end process ownership, right? So you will need to figure out who is that person who is going to really take the ownership of the SLA or the end-to-end process, and what should be the visibility for such kind of a person, right? So that is something that has to be taken care of. Service. Now, for each request, you have service, right? Now, do you want the service to be sent out per request, or do you want to send one request as part of universal request only, right? Do you need to attach those service to universal request, or would it still continue with your existing department tickets that you have? That's something that also that has to be kept in mind as well. And then finally, there's a security aspect, which I think is very critical, especially if you're having HR and legal kind of apps onboarding into UR, right? So we have something called this sensitive users. When I say sensitive users, it's basically a group of users who have access to requests which are sensitive in nature, right? So if somebody has a payroll inquiry, or somebody has an inquiry around, benefits, which is very, very much personal, right? So who would you want those requests to be routed to, right? Do you want a specific group of people who should be routed to, right? So that is something that has to be figured out. If you already have a group that is attending to those kind of requests, probably route it to them. Or if you want to create a new one, that's something that we'll need to figure out as you look to implement UR for your organization. Okay. Now, talking of universal request, there is a sister app, you can say, which is called Universal Task. This is a store app that we have designed. It has no direct link with UR or universal request, but you can see the task. So name is universal task. The reason we are calling it universal task is that this is a task type that we have created, which is similar or on the lines of what we see for HR tasks, right? So those of you have HR entitlement, you have seen HR tasks being used to task employees, and these tasks are of different types, right? You have the document submission task, you have checklist task, you have submit catalog item task, right? Now we have designed universal task, keeping in mind the general population of saying that, okay, HR task only works with HR. With universal task, what we have done is that now we have enabled tasking to be done by anyone now. So if you have, say, for example, you are in IT or you are in finance or legal labs, right? So you want a way to task your employees. You don't really need to create one anymore. You can directly tie universal tasks to the departments or the BUs that you need tasking for, and it will start working just the way HR task does, right? So you can now submit. If you really look at this screenshot here, there are 5 different task types that we have shipped out of the box, right? So these are the task types that you can assign to the employees, and they can complete the task, and that can help, figure out or close the request that the employee has created. So this is a feature that is available on store, and you can try it out to do tasking for employees right now. It supports only employee tasking right now. Okay, coming to the roadmap. So I think universal request, the first release we had the Paris release as well. Now, but the Paris release was a limited access release because it was more of a beta product that we wanted to take out for a test drive with a few limited set of customers. Quebec is when we started actually to we made it GA basically, right? And it went GA with incident and HR cases, and then workplace services kind of came up with integrations during that release, right? And then Universal Task was, as I said, it was a store app, and it came in March 2021, right? So that's the starting of for the of the roadmap for Universal Request. Through the release, we have added more integrations. Like in the Rome release, one of the notable integrations that we added was the RITM integration. Not the request, but the RITM integrations with Universal Request, right? San Diego, we took a pause to understand what the feedback is that we are getting, given that we are 2 releases old. So we kind of focus on the feedbacks and also work on a few UI improvements on the platform side to make sure that everything is as per the standard. Tokyo, again, we took like leap again, and we kind of addressed 2 main asks. One was the omni-channel UR creation, whereby we had requests where customers are saying, okay, I want to enable UR for everything that gets created on my system, right? So be it IT, be it HR, be it CSM or whatever it is, we need to enable UR for every channel that the employee is creating request for. So that's something that we enabled or provided a way using the omnichannel UR creation feature in Tokyo. And then multi-ticket handling is something that has been asked for UR, whereby the question was more around, can we process 2 requests parallelly at the same time? Right. So that was definitely not how UR had designed for, but we kind of added a support whereby you can associate a request to UR, right? And that ticket can show up in your reporting. So if you have HR work on a request and you realize that finance also needs to do some work, so the finance ticket can be associated to the UR, although it will not directly visible on the state, or it will not be directly showing up for the employee, but in terms of reporting, you can do that, right? So that's the other feature that we had created and added as part of the Tokyo release. Okay, moving on. These are the frequently asked questions that we get from customers. And I think the first question is similar, straightforward. I think something that I have already talked about so far. Okay. So the next one, I think this one is, as I said, universal request is kind of it helps customers or employees to raise a request, which can be very simple or very similar to what you have for general request, right? So again, the question that we get is that if you have a general request, then would they not benefit from UR? So that definitely is a no, because yes, you still benefit from UR, because with a general request, you have no way to transfer the request, right? There is no way to figure out where can you transfer it to a different department or not. With UR, it gives you that power to do, right? So that's where you still want to use UR. And even for existing general inquiry requests also, you don't need to create a separate record producer again. You can just enable that general request record producer to create universal request, and it'll give you the same capability in terms of transferring, triaging, and all this stuff, that kind of stuff, right? So definitely you can use general requests, and UR can exist side by side. In fact, universal requests complements the general request that you have already there in your system. Which channels are supported? As I said, right now, the way we have made it work is that you can create a UR through Service Portal. You can create it using a virtual agent. So we have out-of-the-box topics which can create UR, and now mobile app also can support universal requests, right? So the idea is that even URs can be created by agents on the native UI or on the platform UI that you see. But the recommendation is that from our end is that agents should not be creating a UR, right? They should probably always be creating a department tickets, because that's where the knowledge resides. So if an agent is creating a request, the agent probably would be knowing as to which department this request should be going into. So that's a general guidance we have, saying that you do not really agents do not really create universal requests in the back end, but it remains in the front end where the employees can use it to create the request, right? And I think in Tokyo, as I said, the moment with the Tokyo release, we kind of implemented the omnichannel UR creation. So the moment you insert a request into a table, you have the facility or flexibility to create a UR for the request. So basically, any request that gets generated for a particular table that you are creating requests for, it can create a UR for everything that goes into that table. So that facility exists if you want to enable it across different tables and across different channels that the employee is creating requests for. Again, this is very similar to what I've talked about. So I think you can probably, when the deck is shared out, you can take a look at this. This is very important. So universal requests and sensitive information, right? So as I said, I think I touched upon this in the beginning. What happens when employee puts in something sensitive or something that is PII and something that should only be probably seen by particular department, which in this case mostly is the HR department or the legal department, right? You do not want that to be viewed by everyone or all the triaging agents who are triaging UR, right? So we have a way to solve that. There are 3 different ways that you can do that. So one way is that when the employee is submitting the request, if the employee knows that there is sensitive information in this request, they can click on the checkbox which says, I have sensitive information in this request. And once they check this, their ticket will get restricted, right? And as I said in the design consideration slide, that if there is a group, you need to have a group which is kind of entitled to see those requests. So that ticket will only be visible to that group, right? Now the ticket number as such will be visible to others, but they will not be able to see 4 things within the request, right? So one is they will not be able to see the comments. They will not be able to see the short description, the description, and any attachment that the employee has requested. So we are basically hiding out masking out all the information all the things that can actually identify the employee. So we are kind of making sure that although the ticket is visible, but the important records that needs to be hidden stays hidden, right? And this agent can now make sure that it gets routed to the right department. Now, if for some reason the employee has not selected the request sensitive flag, once the request comes into the backend, there is a way to restrict it. Like agents can simply look at the request and say, and they realize that this is a sensitive request, they can mark the request sensitive by clicking on the restrict button that is available on the universal request ticket page, right? That's the second one. And then the third one is basically where you are now, you can mark a service. So for example, for some reason, if you have employee relations request that is part of universal request, so any request that created as employee relations will automatically get marked as sensitive. So that provision is also there, right? So these are the 3 ways that you can actually see how and how universal request can be restricted. Now, who can see a universal request and when it has been restricted? As I said, the first is the sensitive info agents who have the sensitive info role, they can see it. The second one is the assigned to, right? So for example, once the UR was created, it was sensitive and it got transferred to HR, right? Once it got transferred to HR, there was a particular assignment group that was assigned to the HR ticket. So that group will be able to see the UR. No one else will be able to see the UR other than that assignment group and this agent who kind of recreated, and sensitive agent who has access to it, right? And then finally, and also I think the other thing is if the primary ticket, if you transfer the primary ticket also, and the sensitive flag stays, the same restrictions will keep getting applied as the request moves from one department to the other, where it will be restricted by the sensitive info role and the assignment group that has been associated with the primary ticket for the UR. Right, so we have made sure that there is enough protection to protect the PII or sensitive information that you have as part of the request. Okay, I think yes, for customers who have adopted Unified Portal, so I think there is no direct relation as such between UR and Unified, but I think Unified Portal plays a big role in enabling UR, right? So with Unified Portal now you have HR, IT all coming together, right? Now with UR, we are just doing the same, right? Where you are saying an employee can raise an HR request and I can transfer it to IT, right? Now with UR, with the Unified Portal now, the employee also, it kind of solves the problem for the employee, because employee does not need to go to different portals to see what the request is, right? They can still be on the same portal and see the request without really having to move across. So Unified Portal complements UR in a way that it kind of enhances the single ticket experience that we talked about, or we kind of envisioned with UR, right? So if you have plans or you already have it, I think it's a very good fit and they go very well together, UR and a Unified Portal. Can universal requests integrate with CSM? Yes, as I said, there is no restriction in terms of which apps can be integrated with UR. And if you want to really extend it to external customers also, that can also be done. But again, the front ticket will always be the CSM ticket, and UR could be the sibling of the case that was created by the customer to really make sure that routing happens across departments. So yes, you can do it, but I think in terms of integrations, you probably would want to evaluate which kind of use cases that you would want to integrate for CSM, because CSM supports both internal and external use cases. UR was primarily designed to make sure that it is catering to the internal audience. Yes, though I think this was a top ask once we went live with UR, is the request item integration with UR, right? So we did not directly integrate with requests, but we integrated with request items, which is the RITMs, right? And the reason for that is UR can process only one request at a time, or can have only one active ticket at a time. So with request, that was a bit tricky, because request can have multiple RITMs folded under it, right? So that will not be a right representation of how the different states that those requests are going through. That's the reason we have RITM integration with UR, right? So if you have any catalog item that is creating an RITM, that can get directly associated with the UR. And again, as usual, you can see all the stages, all the steps that are being followed, and employee can track for it. Now, it is quite possible that you want to transfer that for some reason. If that catalog item or the RITM needs to be transferred, we have that facility as well to transfer it to the right catalog or the right department. For the employee, it still remains the same. And one of the top reasons why we did it was that we realized that a lot of customers had this question in terms of, hey, I see a lot of catalog items being misused or not being used the right way, because of which we get requests being sent as RITMs, which are not to the right, not the right place for raising those requests, right? So they needed a way to close those or transfer those requests as well. That's where the RITM integration comes into picture. So I think some of the considerations that we have when you think about UR is the multi-ticket tracking. As I said, at universal request at any point of time, only supports one ticket, right? So you can have only one HR case or one incident type to it, and it will track the state changes for only that request. So multiple tickets will not be cannot be associated to UR, right? And once the request has moved on, like from if you have transferred from HR to IT, you cannot get back the same HR request if IT was to transfer it back to HR, right? So it'll be a creation of a new HR ticket, right? So once the state has changed or the state has moved on, the existing request will get closed, and there is no provision to kind of add the existing HR cases to the UR, because that impacts the overall state change mapping that we have for UR. Right. Although you can associate, as I said, in Tokyo, we released that feature of associating multiple tickets to UR. And you can do that using the associated ticket feature that we have for UR. UR auto creation of primary tickets. Yes, you can do that. So you can suggest which is the right department for the ticket. And you also can configure UR to make sure that it creates the right department ticket. So for example, if an employee has created a request saying that I need more information around benefits, so you for sure know that this is an HR request. And the ML model that we have can also predict which is the right service for this, right? So keeping these two considerations, these two information in mind, we have the facility to enable UR to create the department ticket as well. So once the request gets submitted, without any triaging agent, UR can automatically figure out which is the right department for this and then create the request. So in this case, it can create the HR request, and the ticket will get associated with the UR, and the HR agent can straight away start working on it. So that is definitely possible using the ML models that we have. I think this is another question that we get very frequently is, what is the number of records you need? I think there's a minimum of 10,000 records you will need to have to train the models so that you have the optimized way of creating the primary ticket for ML models to kind of really predict and create the right request. I think, yeah, this is just something that I just talked about. IT catalog, again, as I said, it does not support multiple. So if you have order guides, or if you have requests which are creating multiple RITMs, those kind of requests cannot be associated to UR. It has to be only one request at a time that can be associated to UR, right? So that's something, there's another thing to kind of keep in mind. Including integration, as I said, it has integrations with IT incidents, HR case, workplace service delivery, legal service delivery very recently came out with their integrations as well. ITBM has it with their, IDEA kind of requests. Those kind of requests are also available, or integrations are also available out of the box. And when I say out of the box, it's basically all configurations are available. So if you're okay with the configurations, you can simply go and start using UR for these departments. Data model, I'll not really go into this, but if anyone is interested, please feel free to refer the slide as to what does the data model look like, how is it structured. But again, as I said, it extends the task table, so it is similar to any other data task extended tables that you have. Plugins, as I said, we have a one core plugin, and then we have the Universal Request Pro plugin, which is for things around virtual agent, AWA, and predictive intelligence. There is a separate plugin for Universal Task. This is a store plugin, and you can get it from store. If you need the incident management integration for UR, that is also available as a separate plugin called the Incident Management Universal Request. Again, as you see, licensing and packaging, it's pretty much standard. There is no separate purchases that you need to do for this. Right now, there are some, as I said in the beginning, there are some other videos that we have recorded and academy sessions that we have done around Universal Request, which kind of takes you through a very detailed walkthrough of how you create a request, how does it get associated to a department ticket, what are the different configurations that you do it, how to configure UR. We had a very detailed session as well on the part of the academy sessions that we did, I think, some time back. So please feel free to refer to these resources. I think they can give you much more deeper idea in terms of how Universal Request is working out, what are the flows that it can go through, and you can visually see and kind of envision how it would fit in as you kind of start looking for implementing this for your organization. So before questions, I think I will do a quick walkthrough of some of the configurations that we have for universal request, right? So if you really go into a portal, you will see the slide, the menu here. From the menu, if you really look at it, universal request administration, there are two things that I would want to focus your attention on. One is the guided setup for UR, and then we have the guided setup for services, right? Now, guided setup for UR is basically you are setting up the base UR modules to make sure that everything is working fine, right? So something like assigning roles, creating user groups, what are the different states? So universal request has its own states, right? It has the in progress, it has the what do you call closed, canceled. All those states are available with universal request. So if you want to see those, configure those, that is possible through this, right? What are the different priorities that you can set for a universal request? SLAs, all this kind of stuff is very core to universal request. So those are settings that you do it using the universal request guided feature, guided setup for UR. And then we have something called the guided setup for services. So this is actually going to be very important as you look to onboard your different departments into universal request, right? So there are, say, for example, you want to onboard a custom built app, like, say, for example, procurement, right? So you want to build that, onboard that app into universal request. If you really follow these steps, you will be able to do it. Now, it looks a lot, but it's pretty straightforward, where you just need to add tables, add configuration groups, add the state mappings and other things, right? So you can do it, just follow these steps, and you should be done with onboarding onboarding any department that you have, right? And in looking at the existing configurations also, you can get an idea of how things can be used, right? Now, from this configurations, there are a few ones that I want to focus your attention on. One is the transfer state configurations, like what are the different transfer states that you can have as tickets gets transferred from one department to another department, right? You can access those from the admin module here as well, right? So there are mapping configurations, transfer configurations, and there is state mapping. So let me go to state mapping first, right? Now you must be thinking as to how things would work out if you have universal request, which has its own set of states, and then you have HR cases with its own set of states, right? That is the mapping that we are allowing here using this. So for example, if I really go and say I take HR case, so I'll open one of them, maybe, right? So if I open, this is an LE case configuration, but if I really open this, you really see that what is the condition that I need to have for the state to be mapped, right? So for an HR cycle events case, the state is closed complete. In that case, the universal request state is also closed, right? So this is the mapping. So you'll have similar mappings for the different states that a life cycle event case has, or you will have different mappings for an incident case that you have, right? So if I really filter by incident here, you will see there are multiple mappings available here, and this is for the different states that you have for incident, right? All those incident states you would want to map into a universal request state. That's what you do here, right? What this allows now is that for the employee, irrespective of whether it's an incident or an HR case or anything else, the states remain the same, right? It's always the universal request states that the employee sees and nothing else, because the mapping has been done at the back end to make sure that those states are covered, right? So it also brings in that consistent experience in terms of what states the employees are saying. So this is one very important configuration that you would be looking out for as you look to configure universal request. As I said, these configurations are available for the different out-of-box integrations that we have done. So if you are okay with it, we can straight away get started with it without really having to make any changes, right? The next one is where you set up the configurations as you're transferring the request. Say, for example, you have an HR request that is associated to an UR, right? Now, for some reason, you realize that this HR request needs to be transferred to IT, right? Now, what happens once this request has been transferred? What happens to the HR case? What happens to the universal request state, right? What is that mapping that you will need to do, right? That's the configuration that you will need to do here, right? So if you really look to transfer, and again, let me filter it by incident, and you can see, you will see that for each table available for transfer mapping. One is called the transfer with resolution and transfer without resolution, right? So when you're transferring the case, there is an option to select what kind of transfer it is. Is the agent solving the request partially and then transferring it to the next department? Or if the agent is saying, no, this was not my request, it came to me, it was transferred to me wrongly, so I'm now transferring it to the right department, right? So that in that case, the agent can use transfer without resolution, right? And what should be the state of the ticket that is currently associated? So what should be the state of HR case when it is being transferred from HR, right? Transfer template. So most of the ticket that gets closed, you will have you would want to add some custom notes as well, right? So for example, IT tickets require resolution notes or the resolution code to kind of close the request. So you can use custom notes that you could update, right? So out of the box, we have shipped one, but if you have a different one to add, you can add it as part of this. So that resolution note will get added to the incident or the HR case once it has been transferred from HR to IT or IT to HR, whichever way, right? So those configurations, you can do it here. So this is the second set of configuration, which is, I think, you would want to really look out for as you look to start implementing UR. Now, there are other things around standard ticket page configurations. Again, most of the things are out of box. Set up my request filters. We have configurations available out of box to really add universal request as part of your my request filters, to hide existing requests if it is tied to universal request. All those kind of configurations are available. But if you want to do some custom ones, these are the ones that you will want to refer to as you kind of implement UR across your organization, right? Yeah, and I think these are new configurations that we added as part of the Tokyo release. Associated ticket creation, which is the additional ticket that you want to associate with the UR. You can make those configurations here. And the omnichannel universal request creation, right? This is the business rules that we kind of shipped out of the box for HR and IT. So those configurations, you can access it from here, right? To begin with, I think most of the configurations are pretty straightforward. If you really say create a service set, you are basically looking to, sorry, I was configured. So you can create a new service request set, right? So based on what kind of services you have configured or which kind of departments you have created, you can actually create service sets and make sure that those things are configured correctly. Now, the other thing to keep in mind as you're configuring UR is effective number. Now, what happens is this actually directly implies the suppress of outbound notifications and effective numbers are actually related. So what happens to your existing notifications that you've configured? So HR case, for example, on creation has a notification sent out saying that HR case has been created, right? So you do not want now to really recreate or make sure that you do not have to modify those notifications because you have UR now, which is taking care of this request. So this actually helps to do that. So there's a new effective number field that we have introduced, which when you use it in your notifications, will now automatically take care of if a UR is associated to an HR case, it will replace the HR case number with a UR number. And if there is no HR case associated, if there's no UR associated to an HR case, the HR case number will still hold, right? So it basically allows you to reuse the existing notifications without really having to create new ones for UR, right? So this is another important configuration that we want to look for. Now, I think other than this, most of the configurations I would say are straightforward. I kind of walked you through the most important ones, but there is a recording that I showed in the previous slide, which kind of covers in a very detailed fashion as to what are the different configurations and how you do the different configurations for UR. So please refer to that if you have more questions. But yes, I will be available now to take questions. And if you have more questions that we probably are not able to answer, we will be posting those answers for those questions in the community once the session is over. So please feel free to check out there as well. With this, I think I'm pretty much done with the presentation. I can take questions if you have any. So please feel free to put your questions on the Q&A section, and we can start taking a stab at it.
Hey, Devajit, we do have a couple of questions that happened in chat. One is, can we use universal request in ITSM and then send the ticket over to a scoped application?
Yes, you can do it across. So as I said, if you have a ticket, HR is a scoped app. So if you have a ticket that is in IT and you for some reason realize that this is an HR ticket, you can transfer it to HR as well. So there is no restricting that.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Sujata,
one more question.
Sorry, go ahead. So go ahead.
Yeah. One more question we have. Do you recommend converting most of the tickets to universal request wherever it is possible? So I marked it as you will answer it on live.
Sure. Yeah, so there is no recommendation as such. I think the question here is to be answered here is, do you see those requests getting routed very frequently, right? Is there a need to kind of transfer the request again and again? And if that is the case, yes, then you should mark those requests for universal request configure those record producer or catalog items to create universal requests so that it helps you transfer the request without disturbing the employee experience. So you can basically enable everything that is there on your catalog or record producer to create a universal request. So if you see the need that way, yes, you could do that as well. What is the down? That's a very interesting question. What is the downside of marking all as UR? The downside, I wouldn't say it's a downside, but because the way I see it is if you mark everything as UR, then all the employees will see is a single ticket experience, which is actually a very positive upside, right? Now, the only thing you need to probably take care of is on the routing side, if you do have a shared service desk, which is actually taking care of all those requests, right? So because the request would come into what do you call, default the queue, and then from there it will get created, right? So other than record producers, which are meant to do a specific task, those, if you're marking for a UR, yes, it is a possibility, but if you probably need to weigh in is that what is it that we're trying to achieve out of it? Is it a single experience that we're looking for employee, but employees is always one ticket? Yes. And we have seen customers who have done that as well. And that's the reason, as I said, omnichannel UR creation is there. So I wouldn't say there is a downside. It's just a question of, in terms of your organization, how do you envision everything coming in as a UR, and how would you route those requests if a lot of majority is coming in as general inquiries? Okay, I think Sujata, that's something that we'll probably investigate and get back to you as to why would you not see it on the agent website.
I can answer that question. So that will be mostly because of the routing agent role. So to create a universal request directly, the agent should have the routing agent role. So HR agents, you can give routing agent role to those agents. They can directly create the universal request.
Right, but they're saying they could do it in the native UI.
Okay, same agent?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Then, yeah, please raise a customer case for the same. We can investigate it further.
Yeah. Okay, we still have 5 minutes. Any more questions?
We do have another question in chat. Is there any easy way to create an RITM from a universal request and close the universal request when the RITM is closed?
So I'm assuming you have a request item which is configured, or a catalog item which is configured to create a UR, right? So if that is the case, yes, you could create a UR and an RITM that gets tagged to the UR. And as with the state mapping that I showed just now, once the request item gets closed, so what happens is the moment a primary ticket gets associated to the UR, the primary ticket is actually driving the state of the UR, right? So if you have configured saying that, okay, when the primary ticket, which is the RITM in this case, gets closed, the UR will also get closed. So that will automatically be taken care of. There is no manual intervention required for it. Okay, I think we will be sharing the slides, right? So I think the link is available there.
That's correct. Yeah, this will be posted. We did put the link to the video where it will be posted in chat as well, if you want to go look for that. But this will be out on our community page, the recording, as well as an FAQ that will have the responses to all of your questions, as well as any questions we were unable to answer today.
Okay, so I think that with this, we are pretty much done. Ryu, any closing comments we have? I think the feedback will be shared out once we close the session, right?
That's right. That's right. It will take us a couple days, but we'll get everything posted. I would just like to thank everyone for joining us. We had a great attendance today and great interaction. We love the questions, and we appreciate the opportunity to present Universal Request to you.